In the heart of Lancashire, amidst the sprawling landscapes dotted with grey smokestacks and the perpetual hum of the cotton mills, life moved in a steady, unyielding rhythm. The Turner family lived in a modest brick cottage, a short walk from the imposing Whitmore mill, where the air was thick with the scent of oil and raw cotton. It was a life marked by long hours and the constant churn of machinery, but for Emily Turner, it was all she had ever known. Emily had been working at the mill since she was 12, her nimble fingers expertly maneuvering the spinning machines. Now, at 21, she had grown accustomed to the grueling workdays that began before dawn and ended well after the sun had set. Her hands were calloused, her back often ached, but her spirit remained unbroken. She was driven by a fierce sense of duty, to her family, to the younger children in the mill who looked up to her, and to herself. Every day, Emily would walk the narrow cobblestone streets to the mill, her head held high despite the oppressive conditions. Her green eyes, framed by a cascade of auburn curls, shone with a quiet determination. She refused to let the drudgery of mill work extinguish her inner fire. Deep down, Emily harbored dreams of a different life, one where she could escape the suffocating grip of the factory and perhaps even find love. It was on one such morning, as the first light of dawn crept through the thick haze, that Emily's life took an unexpected turn. She was operating her loom, her hands moving with practiced precision, when she noticed a figure standing at the edge of the workshop. She recognized him immediately. James Whitmore, the mill owner's son. James Whitmore was a man of contrasts. Tall and handsome, with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. He carried an air of refinement that set him apart from the mill workers. Yet, unlike his father, who was known for his ruthless pursuit of profit, James had a reputation for being kind-hearted, often seen speaking with the workers and inquiring about their well-being. He had spent years studying in London and traveling abroad, absorbing the progressive ideas of social reformers and thinkers. He returned to Lancashire with a restless energy, eager to challenge the injustices he saw around him. But today, as James observed the workers, his gaze seemed to linger on Emily. There was something about her, perhaps the way she carried herself with quiet strength, or the way her eyes flickered with intelligence, that drew him in. He found himself captivated, and before he realized it, he was walking towards her loom. "Miss Turner, isn't it?" James asked, his voice gentle yet firm. Emily looked up, surprised by the directness of his approach. She nodded, her hands pausing mid-motion. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice steady. James smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in his expression. "You've been working here for quite some time. I've noticed your dedication. The mill is fortunate to have someone like you." Emily wasn't sure how to respond. Compliments were rare in the mill, especially from someone of James's status. But there was something in his eyes that made her feel at ease, as if he truly meant what he said. "Thank you, sir," she said cautiously. "I do what I must, as we all do." James nodded, his gaze drifting over the rows of workers, each one toiling away with mechanical precision. The sight weighed heavily on him, but it was Emily's words that struck him the most. "I do what I must, as we all do." The resignation in her tone was a stark reminder of the harsh realities these workers faced daily. "Miss Turner," he began, his voice lowering as if he were sharing a secret, "do you ever wish for something different? A life beyond this mill?" Emily's heart skipped a beat. No one had ever asked her that before, certainly not a man like James Whitmore. But she hesitated, unsure if she could trust him with the truth. "I think we all have our dreams," she finally said, her words carefully measured. "But dreams don't put bread on the table." James nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her words. "True enough," he said softly. "But perhaps those dreams are worth pursuing, even if only in small ways." Emily frowned, trying to discern his meaning. Was he offering her something more, or simply indulging in idle talk? Before she could respond, the mill's overseer, a stern man with little patience for idle workers, approached with a scowl. "Mr. Whitmore, the men in the weaving room have been asking for you," he said, his tone implying that James's presence here was neither necessary nor welcome. James straightened, his demeanor shifting to one of authority. "Very well," he replied, turning back to Emily. "Miss Turner, it was a pleasure speaking with you. I hope we can continue our conversation another time." With that, he left, leaving Emily to ponder their brief exchange. She returned to her work, but her mind was elsewhere, filled with thoughts of the enigmatic Mr. Whitmore and the strange flutter of hope he had ignited within her. In the weeks that followed, James found every excuse to visit the mill, always managing to cross paths with Emily. Their conversations, though brief, grew increasingly personal. James would ask about her family, her thoughts on the world beyond the mill, and occasionally, he would share stories of his travels and the ideas he had encountered. Emily, in turn, found herself opening up to him in ways she had never expected. She told him about her father, who had died in a mill accident years ago, and her dreams of one day leaving the factory to pursue a better life. James listened intently, his admiration for her growing with each passing day. But as their bond deepened, so did the challenges they faced. Word of their interactions began to spread through the mill, and it wasn't long before the whispers reached the ears of James's father, Harold Whitmore. A stern and pragmatic man, Harold had little patience for what he saw as his son's naive idealism. He was even less tolerant of the idea that James might be fraternizing with one of the workers. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, James found himself summoned to his father's study. The room was dimly lit, the heavy curtains drawn to keep out the last light of day. Harold sat behind a large oak desk, his expression stern as he regarded his son. "James," he began, his voice cold and measured, "I've been hearing some troubling things. It seems you've taken quite an interest in one of the mill girls." James's heart sank. He had known this conversation was inevitable, but he wasn't prepared for the intensity of his father's disapproval. "Father," he started, choosing his words carefully, "Emily Turner is not just a mill girl. She's intelligent, compassionate, and strong. She deserves more than the life this mill has offered her." Harold's expression darkened. "And what would you offer her, James?" "A life of hardship and scandal. She's a worker, nothing more. Our family cannot afford to associate with her kind, let alone encourage your attachment to her." James bristled at his father's words. "This isn't about social class, father. It's about justice. The conditions in the mill are inhumane. We have the power to make things better for people like Emily, but we choose profit over compassion." Harold's eyes narrowed, his patience wearing thin. "You speak of compassion, but you forget your place. You are a Whitmore. Our name is built on this mill, on the very system you seek to dismantle. If you continue down this path, you will destroy everything we've built." James met his father's gaze, unflinching. "If what we've built is based on the suffering of others, then perhaps it's time for it to be destroyed." The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Harold's face flushed with anger, but he held his tongue. After a long, charged moment, he spoke, his voice low and threatening. "You will end this nonsense with Miss Turner immediately," he ordered. "And you will cease this foolish talk of reform. If you do not, you will find yourself disinherited and alone, with nothing but your ideals to keep you warm." James left the study that night with a heavy heart, knowing that his relationship with Emily had placed him at a crossroads. The love he felt for her was real, but it was entangled with his desire to change the world around him. He could not have one without the other. The next day, James sought out Emily as she was leaving the mill. The air was cool, and the sky above was a blanket of gray clouds. Emily had sensed something was wrong. She could see it in the way James's shoulders were slumped, the way his usual confidence had faltered. "Emily," he began, his voice soft, "I need to speak with you." They walked in silence to a small clearing near the river, a place where they had often met to escape the noise of the mill. There, surrounded by the gentle rush of water and the whisper of the wind through the trees, James told her everything. His father's threats, the impossible choice before him, and the love he could no longer deny. Emily listened, her heart aching with every word. She knew the dangers of their relationship, the barriers that stood between them, but she had never imagined it would come to this. "James," she said, her voice trembling, "I never wanted you to sacrifice everything for me. Your family, your future. It's too much." He took her hands in his eyes filled with a fierce determination. "Emily, I would give it all up for you. But it's not just about us. It's about the life we could have, the changes we could make together." Tears welled in Emily's eyes, but she fought to keep them at bay. "And what if we fail? What if we lose everything and change nothing?" James shook his head. "Then at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have fought for something worth fighting for." In that moment, Emily realized that she loved James not just for who he was, but for the man he aspired to be. She loved him for his courage, his conviction, and his unwavering belief in a better world. And she knew that, despite the risks, she could not walk away from him. "Then we'll fight together," she whispered, leaning into him. "For us, and for everyone like us." They stood there for a long time, holding each other as the world around them seemed to fade away. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but they would face it together, armed with love and a shared vision of a future where their dreams could finally come true. And so, James and Emily's journey began. They fought against the forces that sought to keep them apart, challenging the injustices of the mill and the society that supported it. They faced hardship and loss, but through it all, their love only grew stronger. Together, they became a symbol of hope for the workers, a testament to the power of love and the courage to stand up for what was right. And in the end, it was not the mill, but the strength of their hearts that endured.